And I'm going to echo a lot of the comments that that were generated, saying that you broke that down into words we could all understand. So thank you for those graphics, thank you for those slides, and thank you for your insights on that article. So, and I thank Dr. Paula Parks for offering to talk with us today about our second article, When Pursuing Diversity, Victory is Hard to Define. So Paula, I have 5 questions for you that were generated from the article. And the first is, define the words diversity and inclusion, and talk about why they are important on a college campus such as ours.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. First, inclusion really isn't a term that I like. It sounds possibly begrudgingly, like, oh, okay, you can be part of it. I really like the terms welcomed and appreciated and valued. They communicate something very different than just being included. Diversity means a variety, people from different socioeconomic, different cultural, gender, sexual orientations, different backgrounds, and hopefully that diversity comes with appreciation. I have an example from my English class. This is a non-emoja class, and we read an article called Decolonizing the Mind, and it was by a Kenyan author. And the variety of students really added something for everyone in terms of understanding that article. So he talked about how, as a Kenyan, he grew up speaking his native language, but once he went to school, Kenya was taken over by the British. He was forced to speak English. And in fact, the students were encouraged to be traitors to each other and tell on each other, oh, somebody spoke English, somebody spoke their native language, and they were in trouble. So the Hispanic students had an interesting viewpoint on that because they could identify with that in terms of being discouraged from speaking Spanish and how English was held up as the language they should be speaking. The Black students identified with it and brought in their own experiences as well in terms of Black English being discouraged and called bad grammar, slang, but yet it was the language they spoke at home and the language that their culture was also part of. I had a student from Cameroon, another country in Africa. International students always, of course, are going to bring much more to it. And she said she's had that same experience in her country where her culture was in her language. And when she started school, first it was an English school and she was supposed to speak English, and then she went to a French school. But how that oppression of her culture came through in the insistence that English was the only valid form of communication, whether that was formal or informal. So the discussion was much more enriching from different viewpoints, and students got to see how the imposition of English can oppress a people and a culture. We read something else called Guess Who Doesn't Fit In at Work. And I guess you can guess that the people who don't fit in are people from the global majority. And it showed, although we are certainly more likely to hire people that we're comfortable with. And so it had this quote that more diverse teams outperform less diverse teams because different viewpoints bring forward creativity. And so that would talk about the importance of diversity, not just at the classroom level, but at the department level as we're trying to solve problems, at the area level as we're trying to come up with solutions, at the campus level, that different ideas, different viewpoint bring out better ideas. So diversity enriches all levels from the classroom all the way up to the campus level.
That's great, thank you. So our second question is, George Henderson of the University of Oklahoma said, quote, "Faculty members tend to stick to their own group. So do students. I hear as many Black students say they're more comfortable with Black people as I hear white students say they're more comfortable with white people." End quote. Is this a problem? And how do we get to the point where students and faculty don't make that racial qualification?
I think it's natural that people are more comfortable with people with whom they share experiences. And that isn't always race. So if I walk into the forum on opening day, I'm going to look for the English department, and a lot of the English department, we're going to sit together. And nobody's saying, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. The English department is sitting together, math is sitting together, library is over here. So you look for people that you share, that you have things in common with. I remember when I moved to New York for grad school, and my first really good friend was a Japanese American student from San Francisco, because I realized at that point that West Coast is such a culture, and I am so West Coast, and the people from the East Coast could not get upset about cockroaches. So I absolutely had to find other people from California, and we had to commiserate with each other about, we just cannot take cockroaches in the bathroom in our dorms. So it's like we're drawn to people who are like us. And certainly race is a big part of our identity. And I am certainly drawn to Black people, and I was raised in a Black neighborhood and taught that that's a safe space. And when I started college and I walked into the cafeteria the first day and I didn't know anybody, yes, I looked for the Black people. And that's where I felt safe, and I knew I was welcome there. And when I remember one graduation at BC, right afterwards, we were getting ready to head to the room and take off our gowns. And I saw for the first time a new Black faculty member. And she saw me, and we were just like so happy to see each other. We didn't know each other. We almost ran up to each other and hugged each other. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. You're here too. Oh, I don't have a phone. I don't have pencil. I don't have paper. Okay, can you memorize my number? Okay, are you in the phone book? And we got together a couple of weeks later. Then we connected our husbands. Then we found out our oldest children were the same age, and all of our families are friends. So I think it's important, and I think it's okay that we're comfortable with people who are like us. School and work provide unique opportunities to be with people who are not like us. We probably live in neighborhoods with people like us, go to church with people like us. So I think it's important that we do spend time with people who are different from us. I think the problem is if we're not welcome. And I'm going to pick on the counselors because they're the nicest group of people on campus. If I go try to sit with the counselors in the forum and they say, no, you can't sit with me because you're from the English department and you belong over there, then it's a problem. It's a problem if we're not welcome with other groups. It's a problem if we don't or avoid spending time with other groups. But I don't think it's a problem that we feel more comfortable with people like us, whoever that is.
Thank you for that. I'm looking at these comments. These comments are great. Keep those coming, people. So our next question, what are some common slights or microaggressions made, and how can people avoid making them?
Well, first, let me define a microaggression. That's kind of an everyday verbal, nonverbal slight or insult against a group. It might be intentional, it might not be. It seems small, so micro, but when it happens time after time, it becomes compounded, and it's very wearisome. It could be a use of language like "that's so gay," which is obviously insulting, or "black sheep of the family," or "I got gypped," or "somebody's an Indian giver." So we have to watch how we use our words, or inappropriate humor that degrades someone, expressing a political belief about a group as if they aren't there And my student gave an example of that at yesterday's Senate, not calling on Black students. There's a certain invisibility that a lot of Black students feel. There's an Emoji student a couple years ago told me that she was in an English class and her English teacher, after she called roll, looked around the room and said, I usually have Black students, at least one in my class, and I don't have any this semester. And the student was like, I'm here. How I don't know the reason of even pointing that out, but that's a really blatant example of feeling and being invisible, or an incredible visibility, like asking a student to speak for their race, whether it's slavery or lynching or George Floyd. A student cannot speak for their whole race. Using the N-word in class, which students have told me has happened at BC, and not because they read something, just using that word like it's part of their vocabulary. Expressing surprise that a person can write well. So maybe it's a Latino student and, wow, you wrote this? Or even worse, accusing them of not writing it because of their name. Assuming all Hispanics are illegal, assuming a criminality with Black people. So if somebody says, oh, well, I can't do such and such, my dad's in court. Oh, what did he do? He's an attorney. So expressing any type of surprise at somebody's competence. Oh, you write so well for a Black person. You're so articulate for a Black person. Or holding a student up as an exception to their race. Wow, you're smarter than most Black people, or you're more attractive than most Black people I know. Black people don't tend to do well in my class because they don't work hard, but you're so different. So it seems like a compliment, but it's an insult. And so if it's unintentional, then people need to explore their own biases, and we all have them, and acknowledge that there's an effect on other people, and work really hard to speak in a different way.
I'm sure that those happen much more frequently than we care to admit. I know that was something that was brought up in the article. That's why we had the question. So our next question, how do we define progress? And how can we determine that we're making progress in this effort?
Well, we can define it a couple ways, and one would be a quantitative way. We can just look at numbers and decide that there's a problem with it. So if we look at, say, faculty-student ratio, we've looked at faculty diversification. So Hispanic students are 68%. Hispanic faculty are 20%. So if we decide that that's a problem because students like to see faculty and deserve a diverse faculty, but like to see faculty and are inspired by faculty who they can connect with, we come up with a plan. Are we going to increase the pool? How are we going to attract others? Is it recruiting? Is it putting ads in publications, going to certain job fairs, training, hiring committees, mentoring agile? What are we going to do? And then come up with a goal. We're going to have a certain increase over whatever time period, 2-3 years. And then at the end of that 2 or 3 years, has there been a change? So that's strictly by the numbers. And actually we should have different types of ways to measure progress based on some of the issues that we have. And one might be a qualitative way. You might say, I'm hearing that African-American students have concerns. Let's listen to them. Let's have a forum. Let's gather information. And what I did today in my Emoja class is I asked students, what is it like being an African-American student at BC? And a few students stayed after class and told me, and what they told me bothered me. And I don't think this is the experience we want our students to have. I don't. So one person said in their sociology class, and I know names, but I'm not naming them, that there was a video on sexual harassment. And everyone in the video who were sexually harassing were Black men. There was a music class, and in the context of giving background on the music, there was some background on slavery and lynching. And during that discussion, a Black girl, and she happened to be disabled, her phone rang. And the professor said, "Does anyone have a rope and a tree?" And that's not funny. So that's an example of inappropriate humor. And as I said, with the microaggressions, these are compounded. And a student said that she told the professor she was double majoring in nursing and kinesiology. And the professor was like, "Wow, you're actually smart." So there's an assumption that she's not competent, and there's a surprise that she's doing well. In a music class, there was a discussion on guitar music, and the student said, "Oh, I like guitar." And the professor said, "Yes, and yeah, there is guitar and rap music." And the assumption is he's a Black male, he listens to rap music. And actually he doesn't, he listens to alternative music. So these are assumptions that people fall into a narrow box, and they're not competent as well. So I think it would be a really great idea to listen to student experiences. What is it like for you on a daily basis being a Black student at Bakersfield College? What is it like for Black faculty and staff? What is it like for students of color? Listen to that with an open heart and think, does that match what we want their experiences to be? Follow up with a survey or a focus group so our college is what we say it is and what we want it to be.
I know for one, I'm going to take that much more to heart and really pay attention to what I say. I hope I'm not contributing to that. That was very insightful and very impactful, and thank you for your insights, and thank you too for your students for being so articulate about their experiences. And finally, our last question. The article highlights that achieving racial equity is a long-term struggle. That being the case, how do we keep the momentum moving in the right direction despite its long-term nature?
I think we have to acknowledge our past, acknowledge the past of our country and how it has shaped who we are. This country was founded on stealing land from Native Americans, stealing human beings from Africa, and building an entire economy around enslavement and Jim Crow, ascribing second-class status to immigrants, whether they came from Mexico or Japan or China, and killing or marginalizing anyone that we consider to be other. In short, totally not appreciating diversity. That's our past. And we have to make a real effort to not let that be our present. We have to want to improve ourselves. We have to want to improve our campus for ourselves and for our students. We have to come at this with an open mind and an open heart, and not be afraid of change, and not come from a scarcity mindset. There is enough. There's enough. There's enough for us. There's enough for our students. And we are in this together. This is a collective struggle. When we win, we all win. It's not like one group wins. We're all in this together. And that's what We Are BC means. It means that we're all in this together. We have to continue to have these conversations and educate ourselves. And these aren't easy conversations, not about our past. And what my students told me today was not easy to hear. But we have to do that in order to improve and to grow. We have to have an open dialogue and listen without judging, listen without shutting down, and be committed to that goal. We have to be intentional about doing something different. We have to not just make a collective commitment, we have to make a personal commitment. And I encourage all of us to make that personal commitment so that BC really is everything that we want it to be. Thank you.
Those are fantastic words to end with, Paula. Thank you. Thank you again for your insights, and thank you for sharing what your students had to say. Nick, thank you again for being with us today. And I am now going to hand it back to Todd for some closing remarks.